Now, whatever the outcome of this election, this has been one of the most dramatic campaigns in decades, with Democrats switching candidates and 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump. Well, let's get more on just how historic this campaign has been with Evan McCormick, who is an associate research scholar at Columbia University's Research Institute, INCITE. Evan, thanks so much for joining us on the program. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. It's election day. How are you feeling?
It's first of all, thanks so much for having me. I'm feeling very uncertain, like about a lot of Americans and likely people watching from around the globe. But I think one thing I am certain of is, speaking as a historian, is that the stakes of this election are truly historic. It's hard to imagine or find a parallel in recent memory from modern political history of 2 campaigns that are so diametrically opposed in their views of where the country is headed and should be headed. You have Harris on one hand, whose campaign's closing argument has been about unity, about going forward, about opportunities for the middle class, and of course is historic in the sense that she would be the country's first female president. On the other hand, Trump's campaign largely making a closing argument in terms of grievances, political grievances against the Biden-Harris White House, but also personal grievances about his loss in 2020 and the fairness of any vote in which he would lose, and of course running as a convicted felon, the personal grievance that put him in that situation. I think the way that the stakes of this election feel at this moment is that if Harris were to win, it would be the first and a really important first step kind of away from the years in which this Trump movement has held such sway over American politics. If Trump were to win tonight, it feels very much like the Trump movement could very well put an indelible stamp on American politics. So it's no exaggeration to say that it feels like the health of American democracy and its role in the world is on the ballot tonight.
Lots are at stake in these elections. We know that the results are going to take time to come in. But as an historian, tell us what are the clues that we should be looking out for as to how this will all play out? Which places should we be keeping our eyes on?
Well, I think you referenced earlier the 7 states that will likely play a crucial role in deciding the vote due to the electoral votes that are apportioned to those states. Pennsylvania is perhaps the most important, given that there are 19 votes at stake there. The way that Pennsylvania goes, one way or the other, will largely determine the outcome of the election. But there are a number of combinations among these battleground states, which include Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona. Democrats often refer to the blue wall that Biden was able to rely on in 2020 of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So I think Democrats will be looking at those states. As you said, though, there's a lot of uncertainty around what we're going to expect tonight. In addition to the fact that polls have kind of shown a coin flip going into tonight, there's a lot of uncertainty about some of the trends that pollsters have picked up and how they'll actually manifest. So in terms of there's been reporting about Trump's making inroads with young male voters, with Black and Latino voters, but I think it's an open question to see how that manifests in terms of those demographics actually coming out to cast votes. Similarly, in terms of Harris's side in an election that's had so much to do with women's rights and bodily autonomy, which has been under assault from conservatives here in the United States, how that will manifest in terms of driving women out to the polls of all ages and all political stripes, Democrats, independents, and possibly swing voters as well. So that's to say we have a few states to watch, but we also have a few voting trends that I think many around the United States and around the world surely have read about and are thinking about, but we won't know until the results begin to come in quite late tonight what difference those are going to make in this historic election.
Yeah, we'll be watching, of course, very closely. Whatever the outcome of this election, whether Harris wins or Trump wins, history will be made. I want to focus on Harris, first of all. If she's elected, she'd become the first woman president, the first Black president, the first Asian president. She hasn't made that the vocal point of her campaign, but just lay out for us how historic a win for her would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's thinking back to 2008 when Barack Obama won. Of course, he campaigned with a message of hope and change, but he embodied that hope and change too as the first African American president. And it's very hard to overstate the moment of opportunity that win created. So during the campaign, you're right, Harris has largely campaigned on her status as vice president, has not strayed too far from Biden's positions. There actually hasn't been a lot of policy discussion in the debate, owing in part, I think, to that fact, but also to the way that Trump has made this largely a personal election. One effect of that would be if Harris were to win, the effect of the first female president being elected in the United States, as you said, a female president of color as well, would really open up a lot of policy opportunities, will also raise a lot of expectations in terms of what she would be able to do if Obama's election in 2008 is any analogy for that, because it was truly his election, the historic nature of it raised expectations, not just in the United States, but around the world. And when you think about foreign policy, one thing that we've barely tapped into in this election is what kind of leader, what kind of speaker a President Harris would be when she reached foreign audiences. So some of that
Yes.
is difficult to foresee, but truly in the historic nature of a Harris victory, if that were to come to pass, would have a really important attendant effect in terms of policy and political outcomes.
Evan, thank you so much for breaking down the situation in the US for us. We really appreciate your time. That's Evan McCormick, who is an associate research scholar at Columbia University's Research Institute, INCITE. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.